Hi, this is Dr. Margo Jacquot, the owner and director of the Juniper Center. So we're now in week 8 of our shutdown with COVID-19, and folks are still struggling with a lot of stress, economic worries, really being on top of each other with their families, wondering when this is going to end, missing events, missing family, missing friends, worrying about, are they going to be able to find another job? There's just plenty to sort of fill people's minds and to be concerned about. One of the things that I've been talking about in some of these videos is how to manage our own nervous systems. Because what these kinds of circumstances do is it brings our system into a state of emergency, in a state of anxiety, in a state of stress. And those emergency states often sound like fight, flight, or freeze. And so we've talked about the fight response. Today, I want to talk a bit about the flight response. So flight is understandable from an evolutionary perspective, if that's your belief. What flight does for us is, if you think about it, when we were faced with a threat, if we needed to, our initial response would be to turn heel and run. So flight was a great way to get away from a predator that was coming for us, the saber-toothed tiger that was going to eat us. So we still have that capacity, but it looks so different currently. We don't necessarily turn and run, but the sensation, the desire to escape, to get away from, the impulse to move away from whatever feels like the threat is still a natural neurological nervous system defense. So what it might look like right now is you're in a situation where you're really worried about money, you're really scared, and your emergency response system is online, but you don't know what to do. You don't know what's going to happen with finances or with your business. So your system really wants to run. You want to get out of there. And it shows up as fidgeting. It might show up in your system as tension, as not sleeping, as stomach upset. It's an impulse to move, but there's no movement. There's nowhere to go. So when we're in that kind of situation, what we need to do in our own system is to try to find a way to activate that system where we could be theoretically escaping or running or fleeing in a way to save ourselves. Now, before I get into a way that you might do that, I can tell you, as we know, there are several ways that people do this anyway, right? We turn around and walk out of a room, which can be a really good thing. Or sometimes people drink. If we think of flight response as avoidance, it can show up as avoidance when it's just sort of stymied, when there's nowhere for it to go. So what that flight response can look like is drinking, over drinking. Again, if you drink socially, then it works for you, that's great. But this is where you're using alcohol or substances or drugs or sex or gambling or any of a number of things to try to keep yourself from feeling your feelings on a regular basis, on an ongoing basis. So that's one way it shows up. Overeating right now is a biggie for people. You know, there's lots of jokes about, oh, the COVID-15. And for some folks, it's funny, but it's not funny. Nobody wants to walk out of this 15 pounds heavier. And it's a way to try to manage boredom or anxiety or depression or stress. So what we're talking about are ways to try to engage our system in such a way that we don't do things to ourselves that, quite frankly, we just don't want to do. We don't want to walk out of this feeling worse than when we got into it. So one of the ways that we can do this engagement of our nervous system is, first of all, to acknowledge that there's an issue at hand, to acknowledge that you're feeling this sense of flight, to acknowledge that you're feeling a need to escape, to get away from whatever it is that's going on, the anxiety that you're feeling in your system, and to do something to engage your system in a positive way. So that would look like actually going outside and going for a physical run. But it's not just, I'm going to stick my headphones in and I'm going to take off. The real secret here, the key to this, and if you're not a runner, you can do this walking, for example. But the key is to do it with intentionality. And by intentionality, I mean You are holding in your consciousness somewhere the worry, the fear, the concern. You're not just shoving it to the side, popping in your headphones and heading off on the path. You're thinking, okay, so what am I noticing in my system? I feel like I'm just going to climb out of my skin. All right, I need to go for a walk. And then you're noticing your body doing that walk, and you're associating the concern, the worry, the fear with the physical movement simultaneously. I'm worried about finances. Right, left, right, left, right, left. I'm worried my business is going to fail. Right, left, right, left, right, left. What you're doing is you're engaging that, not in an avoidant way. You're engaging your nervous system to begin to expend some of that extra energy. It's the adrenaline, all of those movement impulses. You're engaging your system to start to express that and to be able to work it through. As you do that, hopefully what will happen is that feeling, that sense of anxiety will begin to diminish. If it's ramping up, then this is not something that you ought to try. You need to try something else. There are lots of things that you can do. The other thing that you can do, because sometimes the weather is crummy or you don't have a treadmill in your house or whatever the case may be, something else that you can try is using your visualization system. Now, let's talk for a moment about visualization. Michael Phelps, who is an Olympic swimmer, used visualization in his training. He would train for 2 hours a day, and I don't mean in the pool. Yes, he got into the pool for several hours a day, but he would spend 2 hours a day visualizing the race and what this would look like day after day after day, week after week after week. It was a wonderful way for him to engage his system so that he could be more prepared for what was coming. That's one way of using visualization. Another way of using visualization is to imagine yourself doing something physical, because the motor system of your brain doesn't really care if it's real or imagined. You can get benefit just from imagining something. You can imagine yourself going for that run while you're simultaneously thinking about, oh my gosh, I'm really scared about this. I don't know what the future is going to bring. Are my kids going to go back to school in the fall? Am I going to have a job in the fall? What are our finances going to be? Are we going to lose our business? Right? All of those things. As you're thinking about that, and it's going to the periphery. You don't want to go right into the center of it, because that's going to be overwhelming. But noticing it going to the edges, and in your mind's eye, pendulating, meaning going back and forth between noticing the worry. And even if it's just saying, I'm worried about money, I'm worried about finances, I'm worried about my kids, I'm worried about my parents, I'm worried about getting sick, whatever it is, pick one. And then you've got that in your mind, and then you pendulate over to imagining yourself, visualizing yourself doing something physical, and really blowing that out with your sensory system. What do you see in that visualization? What do you hear? What do you taste? What do you smell? What do you touch? What's the air like? What's the temperature of the air? All of your senses. And then you pendulate back. Take a breath. I'm still worried. I'm still worried about these things. And then you pendulate back over to imagining, using visualization, showing your brain that you can do this movement. These are a couple of ways that you can try to help decrease some of that flight response. It's normal that you would feel that right now. It's understandable that you would feel that right now. However, we don't want this to build up in your system, because what happens if we're in a flight system, if we're in an emergency response state, what is likely to happen is it's going to come spilling out elsewhere. We're going to be edgy with people. We're going to be avoidant of other things. It doesn't tend to come out in the ways that we really need it to, that are useful for us. So those are a couple of tips. You can actually do something physical while holding on to just a corner of your worry, or you can hold on to a corner of your worry and pendulate back over to a visualization of doing something physical. Walking, running, swimming, something that will expend that energy. Those are a couple of suggestions. I hope that's helpful to you. Wishing you all good health as we get through this. Bye-bye.